Every woman wanted him for 12 long years. He wanted none, until she arrived with nothing and became his everything.
Subscribe to Wild Sky Stories. Turn on the bell icon so you can do not miss any new video.
The town of Dusty Creek had long since stopped trying to understand Elijah Stone. For 12 years, since he turned 20 and inherited his father's struggling ranch after the fever took both his parents in the same cruel winter, women had come calling. They arrived with fresh pies and warm smiles, with offers of help and hearts full of hope. The banker's daughter, the school teacher from back east, the widow Johnson with her kind eyes and soft hands, even traveling women who passed through town, found themselves drawn to the tall, broad-shouldered man, with eyes the color of storm clouds, and a jaw carved from the same granite that lined the mountain passes. He refused them all, not with cruelty, never with cruelty. Elijah Stone was many things, but he was not a man who caused pain when it could be avoided. He would tip his hat, speak his polite words, and return to his ranch alone. Always alone. The townsfolk whispered that his heart had turned to stone like his name, that the death of his parents had frozen something inside him that could never thaw. The women eventually stopped coming, and Elijah seemed content to let them. His ranch grew despite his solitude, or perhaps because of it. He threw himself into the land with a devotion that bordered on obsession. His cattle were the healthiest in 3 counties. His horses were sought after by ranchers from as far as California. He employed good men and paid them fairly. But when the sun set, he retreated to his empty house and ate his meals in silence, staring out at the vast expanse of territory that belonged to him and wondering why ownership felt so much like imprisonment. It was a Tuesday when she arrived, though Elijah would not know that until later. He was mending fence in the north pasture, his hands working the wire with practiced efficiency, when his foreman rode up with news of trouble at the creek. A wagon had overturned, he said. Some travelers trying to ford at the wrong point. There was a woman. She was alive, but the wagon was lost along with most of her belongings. Elijah mounted his horse and rode without thinking about why he was riding so fast. He told himself it was simple decency, the code of the West that demanded men help those in need. He told himself many things in those years of solitude, and most of them were lies he had grown comfortable believing. She was standing in ankle-deep water when he found her, trying to salvage what little remained of her life from the muddy creek bottom. Her dress was soaked and torn. Her dark hair had come loose from its pins and hung in wet ropes around a face that was neither beautiful nor plain, but something far more dangerous. It was the kind of face that made a man look twice, not because of its features, but because of what lived behind the eyes. Those eyes lifted when she heard his horse approach. They were the color of honey held up to sunlight, and they held no fear, only exhaustion, only a weary determination that Elijah recognized because he saw it in his own reflection every morning. He dismounted without speaking and waded into the water beside her. Together, wordlessly, they pulled a trunk to the bank. It was all that remained. Everything else had been swept downstream or ruined beyond saving. She finally spoke when they stood on solid ground, both of them dripping and breathing hard from the effort. Her voice was low and steady, roughened by something he could not name. She thanked him for his help. She asked how far it was to town. She did not cry, did not wail about her misfortune, did not look to him for salvation the way so many women had looked before. She simply gathered information as though her entire world had not just been pulled apart by a careless current. Her name was Clara Winslow. She was 28 years old, which she told him without shame or apology. She had been traveling west to start over after burying her father in Missouri. The specifics of what she was starting over from remained unspoken, but Elijah understood. Some things did not need to be explained. Some things lived in the shadows between words. He offered to take her to town. She accepted with a nod. He helped her onto his horse and walked beside them, leading the animal by the reins because something in him could not bear to leave her and ride ahead to send back help. Something in him could not bear the thought of her being alone for even those extra minutes. The feeling was foreign. It was uncomfortable. He pushed it down and kept walking. Mrs. Porter at the boarding house took Clara in, clucking over her ruined clothes and promising hot soup and a warm bed. Elijah left money to cover her first week's lodging before she could protest, then escaped back to his ranch with the strange feeling that he had left something important behind. 3 days passed before he found an excuse to return to town. He needed supplies, he told himself. The fact that his pantry was fully stocked was irrelevant. A man could always use more flour, more coffee, more reasons to walk past the boarding house and wonder if he might catch a glimpse of honey-colored eyes. He found her in the general store, speaking with Mr. Abernathy about employment opportunities. She wore a borrowed dress that did not quite fit, her hair pinned up in a style that was too severe for her face, and she was bargaining with the same calm determination he had witnessed at the creek. She needed work, she said. She could cook, clean, keep books. She was educated. She was not afraid of hard labor. What she was, though she did not say it, was desperate. Not the kind of desperation that begged or pleaded, but the quiet kind, that straightened spines and steadied voices and refused to accept defeat. Elijah heard himself speaking before he realized he had opened his mouth. He needed a housekeeper, he said. His ranch house was too large for one man to maintain alone. The position would include room and board, fair wages, and complete respectability with a separate quarters for her privacy. Mr. Abernathy's eyebrows nearly touched his hairline. The stone-hearted bachelor offering a woman a place in his home was news that would spread through Dusty Creek like wildfire. Clara turned those honey eyes on him and studied his face for a long moment. She was measuring him, he realized, weighing him against whatever experiences had taught her to be wary of men and their offers. She asked if she could have time to consider. He said yes. He left the store and wondered what madness had possessed him. She arrived at his ranch 2 days later, her single trunk loaded in a wagon she had borrowed from the livery stable. She had paid for the wagon rental herself, though the money came from somewhere he did not ask about. Perhaps she had sold something. Perhaps she had found other work in the interim. The independence of it struck him in a way he could not explain. The first weeks were awkward. They moved around each other like dancers learning new steps, negotiating the rhythms of shared space. She cooked meals that made him close his eyes with the first bite. She cleaned rooms that had not seen proper attention in years. She kept his books with a precision that revealed the education she had mentioned, and she asked for nothing beyond her agreed-upon wages. At night, in her small quarters off the kitchen, she read books by lamplight. He knew this because he sometimes walked past on his way to bed and saw the glow beneath her door. He imagined her there, curled in a chair with pages spread before her. The image caused an ache in his chest that frightened him. They began talking over breakfast. Small conversations at first. The weather, the cattle, the news from town. Gradually, the words grew deeper. He told her about his parents, about the winter that took them, about the years of rebuilding that followed. She told him about her father's illness, about the debts he left behind, about the man she had almost married, who had revealed his true nature only after the engagement was announced. She did not share the details of what that true nature entailed, but Elijah saw the shadow that crossed her face. He understood that she had escaped something, and that the escape had cost her everything she owned except her dignity. He began looking forward to mornings, then afternoons, then the evenings when they sat on the porch and watched the sun paint the sky in colors that had no names in any language. She asked about the ranch, and he explained it with a passion he had not realized he still possessed. She asked about his dreams, and he discovered he had some. She asked about his solitude, and for the first time, he admitted it was not a choice but a prison. The women before her had seen him as a prize to be won, a successful rancher, a handsome man, a challenge to be conquered. They had not seen him at all. They had seen the ranch, the reputation, the potential for a comfortable life. Clara saw him, just him, the boy who had been too young to lose his parents, The man who had built walls so high he had forgotten there was anything beyond them. The human being who was achingly, desperately lonely despite all his protests to the contrary. He fell in love with her slowly, then all at once. It happened one afternoon when she was teaching his youngest ranch hand to read. The boy was 16 and ashamed of his illiteracy, and Clara had noticed without being told. She sat with him at the kitchen table, patient and kind, her voice gentle as she guided him through simple words. Elijah watched from the doorway and felt something break open inside him, something that had been sealed for so long he had forgotten it existed. He loved her. He loved her courage and her strength. He loved her honey eyes and the way her face softened when she laughed, which was rare but worth waiting for. He loved her independence and her pride and even her stubbornness. He loved the way she challenged him and the way she understood him and the way she never once made him feel like a trophy rather than a person. But he could not tell her. The words gathered in his throat and refused to emerge. Every time he tried, he remembered the women before her. He remembered how they had wanted things from him rather than wanting him. He wondered if Clara stayed because she cared or because she had nowhere else to go. The wondering was poison. It spread through him slowly, tainting every interaction with doubt. He began to withdraw, to rebuild the walls she had so carefully dismantled. He took meals alone when he could avoid it. He found reasons to stay in the far pastures until after dark. He convinced himself that he was protecting them both from an inevitable disappointment. Clara noticed. Of course she noticed. She was not a woman who missed the important things. She confronted him one evening as autumn painted the ranch in shades of gold and rust. She stood on the porch where they had once watched sunsets together and asked him directly why he was pushing her away. He could not lie to her. He had never been able to lie to her. The truth came out in fragments, in halting sentences that revealed more of his heart than he had ever shown to anyone. He told her about the women, about his fear, about his certainty that no one could want him for himself rather than for what he represented. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, when he stood exposed and waiting for her response, she stepped closer. She reached up and touched his face with hands that trembled slightly despite their calluses. She told him she had nothing. No money, no family, no prospects beyond what she could build with her own 2 hands. She had arrived in Dusty Creek with one trunk and a stubborn refusal to give up. Everything she owned could be packed in an hour if she stayed. It was not because she was trapped. If she stayed, it was choice. Her choice. Made freely and without expectation. She stayed, she said, because of him, because of the man who had waded into a creek to help a stranger, because of the man who had offered her work without conditions, because of the man who listened when she spoke and remembered what she said and treated her like an equal rather than a burden or an opportunity. She loved him. She said the words simply, without drama, in that low and steady voice that had captured him from the first moment he heard it. Elijah Stone, who had refused every woman in the country, pulled Clara Winslow into his arms and held her like she was precious, like she was everything, like she was the answer to a question he had been too afraid to ask. He told her he loved her too. The words came easier than he expected, flowing out of the place she had unlocked inside him. He loved her. He wanted her to stay, not as his housekeeper but as his partner, his equal, his wife. If she would have him, she said yes. The wedding took place in the little church in Dusty Creek on a Sunday when the mountains wore their first caps of winter snow. The town turned out in force, eager to witness the impossible. The bachelor who had turned away every woman in the territory, finally claiming a bride. But the townspeople did not understand what they were seeing. They saw a man transformed, but they did not know that the transformation had been internal long before it was visible. They saw a woman who had captured a hardened heart, but they did not know that she had done it simply by seeing the heart for what it truly was. Clara Stone walked out of that church on her husband's arm, and Elijah smiled in a way his neighbors had never seen. It was the smile of a man who had finally come home. The ranch flourished in the years that followed. Children came, 2 daughters and a son who had their mother's eyes and their father's stubborn streak, the empty house filled with laughter and noise, and the particular chaos that accompanies a family, built on love rather than convenience. And every evening, when the work was done and the children were sleeping, Elijah and Clara sat on the porch together. They watched the sun set over land that belonged to them, to the life they had built from ruins and determination, and the courage to let themselves be truly seen. He had refused every woman in the country. He had waited without knowing he was waiting. And she had arrived exactly when she was meant to, carrying nothing but a trunk and a heart brave enough to love a man who had forgotten how to let himself be loved. Some stories are about grand gestures and sweeping romance. This one was about patience, about healing, about 2 broken people who found in each other the missing pieces they had stopped searching for. It was, in the end, a love story, the best kind, the quiet kind, the kind that lasts,